Hey, Shadows listeners. If you're looking to make some extra income that also impacts people, then you need to look at becoming a certified leadership coach with Giant. If you don't already know, Giant has been in the leadership space for over 13 years. I got certified through Giant in 2018, and I've been teaching ever since. Just to give you some context, they used to own and operate the John Maxwell brands. They ran the LeaderCast conferences where Jim Collins, Henry Cloud, Malcolm Gladwell, and Simon Sinek, just to name a few, were regular speakers. They have over 500 coaches worldwide, working in over 127 countries, and are being hired by companies like Google, Chick-fil-A, Pfizer, Delta, and more. And yes, you can do this too. I know this might sound intimidating, but Giant will literally give you everything you need to start your own coaching business from scratch. You get hands-on training from top-level coaches to learn the exact methodology and tools that six-figure coaches are using. You get an all-in-one online platform to run your entire coaching business, even if you want to work 100% remotely. And you'll get to join a thriving community of coaches from all around the world. To get started, Giant is hosting a coaching business workshop to help you learn the ins and outs of how to build a successful coaching business. This is both for experienced coaches, consultants, and those who are looking to start coaching and consulting with little to no experience. If you want to hear the really good news, this whole workshop, it's free, 100% free. And you can reserve your spot by going to giant.tv/shadows. Why not give it a shot? What's better than making a positive change in people's lives and making some extra money in the process? Giant launches a new hiring cohort every month. Now, they only have 20 coaching slots available each month, so it's first come, first serve. So go ahead and make sure you reserve your spot. If you're ready to make an impact and get paid doing it, go to giant.tv/shadows, giant.tv/shadows. Welcome everyone to episode 3 from season 1 of Rise from the Shadows. When you name the emotion, you can tame the emotion. That's right. Today we're going to be talking to Noble Gibbens. He's a former emotionally clueless West Point Army Ranger who's now an emotional intelligence practitioner and corporate emotional intelligence coach. On this episode of Rise from the Shadows, Noble talks about what sparked his emotional growth journey. He discusses what causes emotional knots and how you can give your mind an emotional massage and prevent yourself from going ape. And he talks about our furry, cute little emotional monkey, how that grows and throughout our lives eventually turns into a giant emotional ape that he talks about acknowledging feelings, permission to feel, and expressing our emotions and feelings. This episode is a small dose of the emotional health and fitness program Noble can get you started on over at www.eqgangster.com. Folks, enjoy this episode of Rise from the Shadows.
Big Trim, what's up, bro? It is so good to see you, my man. I love your hairdo. Super stoked to be here. So my name is Noble, and I am a former emotionally clueless West Point Army Ranger, and now an emotional intelligence practitioner and a corporate EQ coach. And I want to share some thoughts with you all regarding the area of emotional intelligence. And the topics are going to be on emotional knots and then going ape. Emotional knots and going ape. So I grew up in a family that we used to yell and scream at each other, and that's how we handled stuff. And then we'd stomp off into our respective corners of the house and pretend like nothing ever happened. So we had zero conflict resolution. I learned how to from very early on, and I don't want to necessarily bust on my parents because I love my parents. My parents are amazing, but just in the area of emotions and emotional intelligence stuff, they just that was not an area that they knew. And so as parents, right, you don't teach what you don't know. I don't teach my kids Arabic because my daughter, I don't speak Arabic. If I spoke Arabic, maybe I do teach her Spanish because I do speak Spanish. My mom's a 4'10" little Hispanic lady. So I do teach Spanish, and now we teach her emotional intelligence as well, our daughter. So I didn't get that until just a few years ago, but it wasn't in my house. So, and then obviously growing into adulthood, I was, obviously went to West Point and then the 82nd Airborne Division, the military and stuff, did not learn about feelings and emotions there. Got into the business world. I'm a serial entrepreneur, never learned about emotions and feelings there. 4 years ago, got in a fight with my wife, and she said, I yelled at her three times in 3 weeks. And then she responded with three things. Number one, Noble, don't ever do that again. Number two, you've never done that before, which means number three, you got issues. And so we went to counseling. My counselor introduced me to this revolutionary new concept called feelings and emotions. And I was like, what in the world is this voodoo magic you're talking about, man? What is this stuff, right? So here I am, a grown man, well into my adulthood, and I have no idea what those two words even mean. That started my emotional growth journey. A couple years after that, I'm like, it was impacting my emotional growth journey. My emotional fitness program was impacting every single area of my life, my faith, my parenting, my marriage, my finances, my fitness, everything, every single area was getting impacted. I'm like, I can't be the only emotionally clueless guy out there. There's got to be other nobles out there. That led us to start the podcast EQ Gangster, and just sharing our lessons learned, my lessons learned of all the junk in my trunk and what I'm learning and how I'm growing and stuff, which led to this concept. So now, and that's turned into a business. So now I've got a couple very big corporate clients, and one of the insights that I got from a recent coaching client was I deal with a lot of type A folks, a lot of very high performing, high achievers, type A folks. And this guy was just having a tough time wrapping his head around why he needs empathy. Right? Yeah, right. He's like, and he's a senior executive of a multi-million dollar international global corporation. And he said, dude, I made it to the top where I'm at now without empathy. Why do I need empathy now? Was kind of his mindset. And so I said, well, one of those things is you're a leader of people, and we're in 2021 where the globe has gone through and is going through one of the most significant emotional events in the history of mankind with all this stuff that's going on. And so if you are not an empathetic leader in the current times we're living in, you may not be leading very long. Right. And so I said, let me explain it to you this way. And he talked about a scenario that he's got a hairpin trigger for his anger, very, very short temper. You look at him sideways and he will jump all over you, kind of thing. And so something triggered him. He got super emotional. I said, okay, let me give you an analogy that will help you out. This is bringing me to my emotional knots. So what happens is when you got triggered, typically now you may only feel anger, but there are actually a lot of times anger is a secondary emotion. It's not a primary emotion. So there's always something that causes anger. You don't just go jump right to anger. There's always something that leads to anger. So typically when you get triggered like that, there are multiple emotions that are going on. You may only recognize anger, but there are typically at least 1, 2, 3 more emotions going on. Each of those emotions that is impacting you right now when you're triggered, emotionally hijacked is another term that's used. Those cause emotional knots in your muscles, in your emotional muscles. You get knots, right? So you may get a knot in your bicep, you may get a knot in your a forearm, in your calf, in your quad, in your back, God forbid. But you got these knots, right? And some knots, so when my wife gives me a massage, I'm like, oh man, I didn't even know that knot was there. Some of our emotional knots, we don't even know that they're there, but they're still impacting our emotional mobility, or another big term nowadays is emotional agility. So, and if you don't deal with those emotional knots, and then so now you've got these knots that are activated inside of you, then 30 minutes later, 2 hours later, the next day, something else triggers you. Now you get an emotional Charlie horse and you get completely locked up emotionally, and which is what's called emotional hijack, where you are no longer driving and you are in the back seat of your emotions and your emotions are driving, where you've kind of lost all control. Now, and I said, look, if you don't deal with every time you get those emotional knots, at some point it's going to turn into an emotional Charlie horse. How you deal with those, how the body and the mind helps to do an emotional massage on those knots, I call it going ape. If you can go ape, it will help reduce those emotional knots that you've got going on. So and I use the term ape because when I stuffed and avoided my emotions as a little kid, it was a cute, furry little fuzzy monkey that I could lock in the basement and not affect me. Well, you keep feeding that little fuzzy, furry, emotional monkey emotional injury after emotional injury after emotional injury after emotional injury after emotional wound after emotional injury, year after year, decade after decade. And you're feeding that little cute, furry, fuzzy little emotional monkey when you were 2 years old and 4 years old and 6 years old. By the time you're my age and you're old school, dude, that cute, furry, fuzzy little monkey is an 800-pound emotional gorilla. That's why I yelled at my wife 3 times. That's why I say to help with those emotional knots, you got to go APE. What that stands for, A.P.E. A is acknowledge. Acknowledge the feelings that you're feeling. How do you do that? I recommend Googling and printing out a thing called emotion wheel. Emotion wheel. Google that, print it out, put it by your desk at your office, stick it on your refrigerator at home to help you acknowledge your feelings and emotions. Use that emotion wheel that'll help acknowledge the emotions. P is permission to feel. Permission to feel. Give yourself permission to feel each of those emotions that you acknowledged in A there in the acknowledge piece. And how you do that, the body typically takes 60 to 90 seconds to feel an emotion. So set your alarm, your watch alarm, your phone alarm, 60 to 90 seconds, and go through each emotion that you acknowledged and allow yourself to feel that emotion. Each emotion separately, because each emotion, you can't say, well, if I just work out my bicep, that'll help out the Charlie horse in my calf. No, each one's different. Each emotion is different. Each feeling is different. Maybe one shows up in your chest, one shows up in your throat, one shows up in your torso, right? So we feel these emotions differently in different spots of our body. E is express. Express those emotions through writing, through a journal. A lot of different ways to do that. Won't go into details now. When there's actually lots of research, a lot of science on the catharsis, the healing power of writing down your thoughts. You can write your thoughts to God. You can write your thoughts to the actual person that you experienced that injury from. Just don't send them the letter. So if you hurt me some way and years ago when we were in the military together, whatever, right? I could write you a letter. Well, Trip, when you were my NCO, you said this to me and it really hurt me and but that doesn't mean I have to throw it away. There's just power in focusing my thoughts and feelings to that person that I'm specifically feeling those feelings about. But again, you don't have to give it to them. You can throw that away. You can burn it. You can file it, whatever. You just don't have to give it to them. But there's power in focusing your thoughts on that and your feelings. The third thing you can do in terms of journaling and expressing yourself through journaling is just do bullet points. Hey, this, I'm feeling this emotion, that emotion, but writing that stuff down. The term is this. One of my special forces buddies taught me this. When you name the emotion, you can tame the emotion. So that process of going ape, acknowledging, permission to feel, expressing those emotions will help the body massage those emotional knots so that when you get triggered again, it won't turn into an emotional Charlie horse. It will just turn into an emotional knots that you do that exercise, you go ape, and again and you just repeat that exercise, and using that go ape process is how you can create and implement a consistent, regular emotional fitness program to help you work through the different issues of life that we experience on a regular basis.
So, sir, I just want to say that was incredible. That the emotion wheel, we'll actually post that on our Instagram page right around the time that this one's released, and we'll have it on Facebook as well. Question for you. Daniel Goleman, American psychologist who helped, kind of spark emotional intelligence. He has 5 key elements to it, self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. Out of those 5, which one do you think you still have to work on the most?
Bro, all of it. All of it, man. So here's the funny thing. So that's a great question. Typically, we have some areas of emotional intelligence we're higher in, some of the areas of emotional intelligence we're lower in. Ironically, I have higher social awareness and social management than I do self-awareness and self-management, but for unhealthy reasons. Because I'm a recovering people pleaser addict, I have been addicted to people pleasing my entire life, except for until 3 or 4 years ago when I started my emotional fitness program.
Yep.
That allowed me, for unhealthy reasons, to become more socially aware, because I've been an addict of people pleasing, right? So again, you can be strong in an area of emotional intelligence for unhealthy reasons. So that's how I would answer that.
Tell our listeners what sparked your interest in emotional intelligence.
So it was that very quick story at the very beginning. But one aspect of it I did not mention. About the same time that I yelled at my wife after 20 years of marriage, yelled at her 3 times. About that same time, completely unrelated to that event, we had been exposed to a hardcore narcissist. And for those of you all who's never heard of that term before, which I hadn't, I thought it was nepotism. I thought, well, that's where you hire your family for business, and they're like, no, dude, that's not a narcissist. A narcissist is, and this is not the technical definition, so this is just Noble's definition, is somebody who is an egomaniac. So it is somebody who the world revolves around them. They are big into control, manipulation, leading through fear, guilt, shame, control, all those negative, toxic leadership tools, if you will. It is somebody who the world revolves around them and everyone is a minion to them. So we met a narcissist, actually was part of one of the businesses we were running at the time, and we got exposed to that. And then I yelled at my wife, again, unrelated events, but those 2 kind of emotional experiences, went to counseling. And then that's when my counselor was like, dude, you need some growth in your area of your feelings and emotions. I'm like, did you just cuss me out? Right. I was like, what is that? And so once we started on that journey, once I started on that journey, that, and not just start on the journey, but once all these different areas started to change in my, like actually change, not like, because here's the deal. The goal of emotional health and emotional fitness is not to become some warm, fuzzy, kumbaya leader. That's not the point of it. The point of it is to be informed by our emotions and manage our emotions, not be controlled by our emotions, right? Our emotions are signs, they're data, they're signals, they're information. And if you don't know how to read that information, if you don't know how to understand that data, how to interpret that data, you can't use it. All that data, that helpful data that you are putting out real time, it's what makes us humans. We're missing out on some of the most powerful, informative things that make us who we are as people, as leaders, as human beings. And the more and the better we can get at reading that emotional dashboard on our emotional car, so to speak, now we'll know, oh man, I need some more fuel here. Oh, I need to turn left here, because it's almost also like a GPS, right? Okay, turn right here, turn left here. Oh, I need a break here. I need to take a break here. I need to manage my emotions in this scenario, right? So there's so much information that we can glean. only if we know how to read and understand and interpret that information.
Speaking of lots of data, you have lots of good data over at eqgangster.com, which is the coolest name. I love the name. I told you that right when I hopped on here with you. We'll have the picture on Instagram page, but I love the light up sign that you got behind you and everything, EQ Mafia. So tell our listeners about everything that you're doing over at eqgangster.com.
Yeah, thank you, Trip. So we did a rebrand, and here's why we did the rebrand. We started out as EQ for entrepreneurs. In fact, we haven't even made all the changes yet. So you may still see some of our logos still say EQ for entrepreneurs. But the reason we've been in this space now for a year and a half, and talking with one of my buddies, he's like, Noble, how many big, bald, bearded, tattooed airborne rangers are in the emotional intelligence space? I said, probably not very many. He said, dude, you are the EQ gangster. So I'm like, oh, that's it, man. The EQ gangster, right? So anyway, that's kind of how we made that transition. And also because a lot of the folks that we're working with, are not entrepreneurs. I've done a lot of stuff for the military. I've done presentations for the military and on emotional intelligence as guest speakers and all that kind of stuff. And it just provides an outside perspective military is easy because that's my background, right? As military. And then also for entrepreneurs, I've done homeschoolers. We homeschool family as well. And so, but a lot of my clients and coaching clients and stuff are executives and leaders and military and not just entrepreneurs. And so I'm like, okay, if we make it EQ Gangster, that'll open it up. So anyway, we're doing a membership, and our membership right now is eqgangster.com/mafia. What?
Ooh.
So that's our membership, and and we've got tons of content on emotional health, emotional intelligence, emotional fitness in that membership. And me and my wife facilitate live group coaching sessions 1 to 2 times a month with all our members on various issues impacting everybody's emotional health and fitness journey.
Nice. Love so much more marketing potential too with eqgangster.com. That's amazing. Well, sir, I want to tell you, thank you very much for taking time to do this. Folks, he is going to be back. We're going to have him on an upcoming episode of the Shadows podcast, but his info was too good. We had to get it out there a lot quicker. So he is now on episode 3, concluding here of Rise from the Shadows. Sir, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you on a future episode.
Thank you, brother.